Hello and welcome to Property Question Time with me, Lucia France. This is a show where you get to bombard our panel of property experts with all of your burning questions. Now, joining me in the studio today, we have Joanna Leggett from Legget Immobilia, and she is the founding director. We've also got Stephen Galphin, property consultant extraordinaire, and joining us from down under in Australia, we've got Paul Mahoney, CEO of Nova Financial Group. So we'll be asking them all of your questions, and we're going to start with Joanna here today. So Joanna, to start with, we've had a question in from one of our viewers who says, I live in the UK, I'm getting on in years, and I'm thinking of buying a place in Provence as a long-term investment, as a holiday home for me to enjoy in my remaining years, but also my two grown-up kids. When I say investment, I mean somewhere that at least maintains its value. Also, myself and my family will probably only use it for 2 to 3 months each year, so I'm looking for somewhere that perhaps we could rent out. My daughter wants access to beaches and Italy. My son favours more towards Marseille for easier transport links. I have about 150k to spend. I wonder if what I'm proposing is a realistic proposition or something that will turn into a burden and a worry. Any advice?
Well, I'd say there's good and bad news here. First of all, the good news is that the property prices have started to increase in France, so there is no chance of them going down as such. So from an investment point of view, you're not going to lose any money. I would say that the bad news is that with that sort of budget, you're not going to get very much. In Marseille, you'd probably be looking at just a studio apartment, which if you want to use it for the family, isn't going to be great. In Cannes, again, those sort of areas along the Côte d'Azur where you can easily get into Italy, again, you're going to be needing a lot more money than that. The average house price in the Provence Côte d'Azur is around about 280,000. Okay. So 150 is quite small. However, if you go slightly back from the coast, I mean, coastal properties are very expensive in all areas of France. But if you come slightly inland a bit, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes, then that budget could get you a nice little one-bedroom cottage. Or, you know, again, it will hold its value, so you're not going to lose money. But it really depends on what you're looking for, how many bedrooms you're going to need if you're using it as a family. And I do think that that is quite a small budget for the areas that you're looking at, so you may want to rethink. The other thing I would always suggest is to pick a city, somewhere like Bordeaux, for example, draw a half-hour circle around it, so then you get the best of both worlds. You can go into the city for the children, etc., for more things to do, but you can also have the countryside for relaxation. And if you're outside of the cities, the prices are a lot lower.
And is there a chance for rental as well outside of the cities? Would you say that that's something that they could go for?
Again, yeah, if it's a half an hour commute, because the French don't tend to commute as much as we do in the UK. So like an hour journey would be too long for the French. They don't tend to commute that way. So if you're renting to French, then you'd need to be within half an hour of a city, I would say. If you're renting in the holiday market, which I presume you would be rather than a permanent let, then you'd be looking at really between April and September are the big rental months, unless you've got heating, etc., and those type of things, which most properties don't have because you don't need it in the winter months, well, apart from the winter months. Yeah, so I would say that, you know, yes, you will get a holiday rental between April and September.
And in terms of the budget that we're talking here, 150k, is there another area of France that you could sort of recommend that might be a more realistic budget for?
Well, for example, in the Charente, the Poitou-Charentes area, where you've got the beaches like La Rochelle and Royan quite close by, not near Italy, unfortunately, for her son, but those sort of areas, you know, the average house price there is 110,000 euros. So you'd get a really nice property in the Poitou-Charentes, maybe an hour from the beach. You've got Poitiers as a main city, so for rental, etc. You've also got Angoulême, which is a major city where easy to rent. In fact, myself, I live sort of 25 minutes outside of Angoulême, so I'm quite rural, but I can go in, you know, in 20 minutes I'm in a city.
Okay, and is that somewhere that other people have kind of bought around that area for rentals and for the sort of reasons that
Yeah, I mean, there's 82 million tourists visit France every year. It's one of the biggest tourist visited countries in the world, so you're guaranteed that you're going to have enough people for rental income for a start. And also, most of the southwest of France is very beautiful, so people do want to go there. It's very big for tourism, and obviously very good value for money in the southwest.
And in terms of transport links, that was a concern there as well. What are we talking about, airports and stations?
Yeah, it's there's lots of different ways you can fly. There's 4 major airports. You've got Bordeaux, you've got Poitiers, you've got Angoulême. There's Bergerac, Brive. There's lots of areas that you can fly into. But also the TGV is very good. It's very fast. For example, from Bordeaux to Paris now, it's under 2 hours.
That's
so
fantastic,
again, that's
yeah.
quite commutable if you wanted to go for a day trip or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's also driving. The roads are nothing like they are in the UK, unless you're in Paris or or a major city.
They're a lot freer. There's much less traffic, isn't there?
And so motorway, you're driving on motorways is very easy and very fast, and there isn't the traffic that we get here in the UK.
Yeah, and when you put the destination in your sat nav, it actually does take you that long rather than another 3 hours.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah.
Great stuff. Okay, thank you so much, Joanna. Stephen, we've got your first question here. So from one of our viewers, he says, "Hello there. I split up with my partner back in August. We have a flat together under a tenants in common agreement, and I own 30%. He wants to stay in the flat, and I would like to know what a reasonable time for him to give me my share of the money back from the flat. I know he says he is in the process of raising the cash with extra borrowing, but there has been no movement or anything so far, apart from the verbal reassurance that things were being sorted, and that was a while ago. I would just like to know what would be considered a reasonable time to wait before having to take up a legal route."
Right, okay. Well, after the south of France, that seems very mundane, doesn't it? But anyway, look, first of all, we're a little bit light on detail here, but you've got to go back to the beginning here. When these tenancies in common are set up originally, when the property is purchased, usually there'll be a document that says or identifies, if you like, the process for coming out of this arrangement. Now, we don't know if that exists here or not. If it did, it would specify how the property is to be valued, how the split is to be undertaken, whether the property is to be sold in total or whether shares can remain. So we'll have to take it here that shares can remain. It is a classic example of the old maxim that says, property is very easy to get into, not quite so easy to get out of.
Yes.
Look, what's a reasonable time to wait while your ex-partner tries to raise finance? Difficult to know. Presumably he's going to use the property as security. That's going to mean a revaluation. Effectively, you're going to go through a purchase process again, and typically in the UK that can take 2 to 3 months at best, could be longer. So I think that's the sort of time. The ultimate remedy here, if you can't get agreement, is you can apply to the courts for an order to sell the property, which actually solves the problem. But of course, there's an expensive route to take. Anything legal is, I'm afraid, these days. But it might just be worth mentioning that to just speed the negotiations up a little bit, to say that, look, I want to move on with my life. I need to go and buy other property. We need to resolve this quickly. So either this gets sorted now, or I have to go for an order for us to just distribute the proceeds from the property in total. I think that's the best advice I can give, really. It's just be a little bit patient. Remember what the process is when you bought it. It's going to be a similar sort of time, and just try and avoid the courts on this one.
Yeah, so basically kind of taking the time frame for the purchase process and sort of transferring it to this one as well.
Exactly so.
Okay, and what if there is still, after that kind of time, a bit of sort of stickiness, nothing's happening, maybe they still haven't kind of shifted anything forwards? What would your advice be then?
Well, as I say, the only remedy then is really to go to the courts and ask for an order to sell the property. But that's, that would be quite a draconian order. The viewer here says that he or she has 30%. A court is going to be very cautious about ordering sale of a property when it's somebody's home and you've got a 30% interest against a 70% interest of the other party. But it's possible to do. But again, it comes back to that original document that probably did set out all the courses of action if there is a dispute at the end of the day.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stephen. We've just got time for one more question for Paul. The question for Paul in Australia is, I'm starting the process of looking for a property to buy as a first-time buyer. I'm currently renting for me and my girlfriend, but we're looking to buy a flat or apartment in Manchester. However, we're finding that the majority of the properties on the market are marked up buy to let only. Does this mean, as a first-time buyer looking for a flat to live in rather than rent out, we cannot put an offer in to buy it? I find it hard to believe that the seller would care if I go on to rent it or live in it once I own it. The money that we receive from the sale is the same regardless of my intentions with it afterwards. Furthermore, I cannot believe the government would have schemes for developers to sell their properties as buy-to-let only. This is really edging homeowners out of the market. By law, are they not able to sell that property as a regular residential purchase?
Yeah, to be honest, that surprises me too. I know there are most definitely developments that are designed and built for the purpose of buy-to-let. There are quite a few PRS or public rental scheme, public rental sector developments in Manchester which are for that purpose. But in general, from what I've seen, even those schemes will often sell to owner-occupiers. Perhaps as a first-time buyer, you're looking to use one of the first-time buyer schemes. You haven't mentioned that, but that might be the issue that you're having, because not all developments offer that, and some developments only offer it in very small portions. So you might have already missed out by the time you look at it. So that might be, part of your question, perhaps. But what I'd recommend is that you look a bit further afield, perhaps, or speak with a property sourcing company or a property advisory company that, again, perhaps has a bit more of an understanding of the broader market and what's out there, and what could work well for you and what you're looking for. So essentially, just providing them with the criteria that the things that you need, and they could come back to you with some recommendations. So yeah, it does surprise me what you've said there. Perhaps it's because you're a first-time buyer and you're looking to use one of the first-time buyer schemes. That makes a little bit more sense to me, if that's the issue you're having. But there are definitely some out there. So don't give up, and either broaden your own search or seek some advice or guidance on what might work for you.
Okay, Paul, thanks very much from down there in Australia. We'll be back very shortly after this break. Hello and welcome back to Property Question Time with me, Lucia France. Now, joining me in the studio today, we have Joanna Leggett and Stephen Galphin. And from Australia, we have Paul Mahoney. So we've got lots more questions for you guys. We'll start again with you, Joanna. Now, we bought our house about 6 years ago and have never received the deeds from the notaire. Is this normal? And is it best to leave them with him, as he will have to store them correctly, or do we chase up on it?
Well, you should have a copy of your deeds. Notaires are notoriously slow at sending them out, but you'll probably find if you pop into your notaires, they'll be able to give you a copy because they're probably still holding them there. The notaire themselves will also have a copy, and usually the notaire stays with the property, so when you go to sell it, they'll keep the deeds from the next person, etc., unless you choose to change notaires. But yes, it is quite normal for them to, they should have sent them out, of course, but it is quite normal for them to be quite slow. But I would say 6 years is probably forgotten rather than being a bit slow. Yeah, so I would suggest just, pop into your local notaire and say that you haven't yet received them, and do get a copy because you will need them yourself at some stage.
And if they sort of didn't have them, what are the problems that could arise from not having your own copy of your deeds for your property?
Well, it depends what you're wanting to do. If you're going to sell the property, then obviously you would need a copy of your deeds, because for the estate agent or whoever's going to take the property on would need to see the cadastral plans, would need to see if there's any right-of-ways, what if there's been any building work done to the property within the last 10 years, for example, and the deeds would show that. Yeah. So it would really be a time when you go to sell that you will need a copy. So just in case that is going to happen, I would try and get them as early as possible.
Yeah, and would it be worth checking with the notaire as well? Maybe have there been any changes during those 6 years? It's a long time, isn't it?
There wouldn't have been any changes to the deeds, because obviously that they are as they stand. Yes. It would only be when you come to sell the property that the deeds may change if works have been carried out.
Right, okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Joanna. And Stephen, for you, we've got another glamorous question here about damp. So our viewer writes in, my property is suffering from damp due to a flower bed up against it in a neighbouring property garden to the height of approximately 4 feet. It's a rented house. I have repeatedly asked agents to contact the owner to have it removed to alleviate the problem and also to allow repainting of the brickwork in that area, which could not be done with the rest of the wall. The present tenants also want work done. Do I have any legal rights to start quoting?
Right, well, the simple answer here is probably not. The flower bed in the next property, I have some difficulty in visualising how it's actually affecting the viewer's property here. It can only be next to it, so I can only presume that the damp is spreading laterally across, and it won't be to any great extent, I wouldn't have thought. Yeah. However, the problem does need resolving. Now, the simplest answer here is the way that the viewer has already approached it, is by asking the agent of the rented property next door to contact the owner to see if something can be done. Okay, well, obviously drawn a blank there. The ultimate remedy is to go to the council. Now, the council do have the power to issue notices to the owner of that property saying that it's either a health and safety risk or it's causing unpleasant damage to the property next door and indeed the property in question owned by the landlord, and they can issue an order that the work be done. I would suggest probably that if that's made known to the agent, they may be a little bit more proactive. From an agent's point of view, unless they're being paid to physically manage the property, their interest is going to be somewhat minimal. There's no fees in it, there's no advantage in it. And so you come back here to having a discussion with your neighbour. It says here that the neighbour is interested in having the work done too, obviously, because the damp will be affecting them more than it is the next door neighbour. I really would, I think, go the council route. It'll either be the building control office within the council or health and safety. It could be either. The problem is that the viewer here is next door. As I've said, the damp is probably going to be minimal on this side of things, and so it may be better that the tenant approaches the council. They may have more sway in actual fact. So good conversation between neighbours here, fairly strong words to the agent, and perhaps the threat of going to the council. I think that's probably the most constructive way forward here.
Yeah, and I suppose, like you say, the person who's actually living in the property probably has more sway on a day-to-day basis.
I would have thought so. I would have thought the damp would be far more relevant to them, and also it's their property, they're occupying it. I suppose at the end of the day, if it's not a complicated structure, if you're fairly good at do it yourself, it wouldn't be that difficult to rebuild a sort of flower bed there. But
yeah, I was kind of envisaging it sort of next to the property, raised up a little bit, so maybe they could just move it away from the house.
Possibly so. I mean, if it does affect the structure of the building in any way, then obviously they'll need landlord's consent to do anything like that. But as I say, I think the real route here is certainly a conversation between the parties to start with, but if not, then recourse to the council.
Great, okay, thank you. Or get a good gardener, I suppose.
Possibly.
And we have a question here for Paul as well. So this one's to Paul. I have 2 rental properties. Both have buy-to-let mortgages. Each property has approximately 75% equity. I'm considering moving into property A and would therefore need to get rid of the buy-to-let mortgage on that property or transfer it to a residential property mortgage. My current mortgage lender told me that I can't just transfer the current 2 mortgages to property B. I understand that there would need to be valuations and set-up fees, etc. And that the only option I have is to either pay off mortgage A with funds I already have, I don't have these funds, or sell property B to pay off the mortgage, or get a residential mortgage for property A. Could I not just remortgage with another buy-to-let lender and then I could effectively pay off one buy-to-let mortgage on the one I want to live in? I don't earn enough to replace the buy-to-let mortgage on property A with a residential mortgage. Would a residential lender consider the buy-to-let profit on property B as income? If so, I would earn enough for a residential mortgage. That is quite a lengthy question. So, Paul, what do you say there?
Okay. I can understand why your current lender has told you that you can't just transfer one to the other. Given that they're both currently on a buy-to-let mortgage with 75% equity, I don't see why you couldn't do what you just said there, so far as remortgage one of them and take the equity, remortgage property B with a new lender, and perhaps assuming the properties are of the same value, you haven't mentioned that, but let's say they're of the same value, 75% equity in each, you could remortgage property B with a new lender, take that equity out and pay off property A. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to do that. That would mean that property A would be debt free. You could then move into that property and you would have a 50% loan to value mortgage on property B, which would be a buy-to-let mortgage. And I suppose that's kind of means that your question about needing property income isn't necessarily required, but just to answer it anyway, some lenders will consider property income, whereas others won't. So it would be about seeking the lenders that do. Again, makes sense to get professional advice there to get a broader understanding of the market, both the residential and buy-to-let mortgages. There is a broad range of products that are only available to intermediaries or advisors and aren't available to individuals such as yourself if you were to walk into your high street bank. Aside from that, of course, the knowledge of the market is quite valuable. So making sure that you get the best product for you, the best terms, the rates, save you money and time, all that sort of stuff. So, going back to the original point of the question, I'm quite sure that you should be able to remortgage property B, take that equity and pay off property A. Some lenders perhaps wouldn't like that. Some lenders on property B perhaps wouldn't like the fact that you're using it to pay off debt on another property because they'll want to know the use of the funds. But again, that just comes back to finding lenders that are okay with it. And that is, perfect job for an advisor to go out to the market, ask all of these questions from a broad range of lenders and get you the best outcome.
Well, that's it for today. So thank you very much to our guests in the studio, Joanna and Stephen, and of course to Paul in Australia. Now, if you have any questions you would like to get answered by our panel of property experts, then do get in touch. The best ways is to email. It's info@propertytelevision.tv. Or, of course, go to our website, www.property-tv.co.uk. So send your questions in there and we will try to answer them on a future episode. Thanks for watching today and we'll see you soon.